This episode of Get Outta Here, the AP Travel Podcast, is sponsored by Carnival Corporation, the world's largest cruise company with 10 of the world's leading brands, including Carnival Cruise Line, Cunard, Holland America Line, Princess Cruises, and Seabourn. To learn about the world's leading cruise lines from Carnival Corporation and great vacation options, contact your travel professional or visit worldsleadingcruiselines.com.
It's Get Outta Here. I'm Warren Levinson. Tell me what's happening around Notre Dame now. If I wanted to go to the neighborhood, what would I see?
Well, Notre Dame is located on one of the two islands in the center of Paris. So Paris in ancient times was essentially based on the Ile de la Cité. And that has always been used as a kind of sacred location, and that's where Notre Dame was built. So what has happened since the cathedral fire, which was on the 15th of April, is that kind of on the southwest, all the bridges on that side are kind of closed. So you can actually see Notre Dame, but you can only see it from the south bank, which is called the Rive Gauche, from quite a distance. You can go round the east side. There's a bridge that's open there that can take you fairly near the burnt-out back of the cathedral. But again, there are barriers all around the cathedral, as you'd imagine. You can also get to the closest part of the cathedral at the north side, but again, the barriers stop you really getting close. But you can, if you approach the island, actually get quite close to actually see the damage. Basically, just to recap on what exactly is happening to the tourists, I've been there, I've spoken with tourists, and they are, as I say, observing from, the left bank of Paris to see what's going on. And in terms of, tourist groups, there are still tourist groups going around and actually doing walking tours around the barriers of Notre Dame. And the tourist guides I've spoken to say that they are, instead of visiting Notre Dame, still taking their tourist groups around the Ile de la Cité and actually using it as a kind of walking tour that then leads them on towards the Louvre, which is maybe about a 15-minute walk from the Ile de la Cité.
How does this affect other things on the Ile de la Cité?
Well, as you can imagine, the Ile de la Cité is Notre Dame Island. There has been a huge impact, obviously, on the boutiques and the tourism shops that are located around the cathedral. I've been to speak with several of the shop owners who have been, telling me really the stories of, how much this fire has impacted their business. The tourists don't really know what is open and what is closed, so they haven't actually had a chance to note if any disaster tourism has taken up, but they do know that they have had a huge hit in terms of their monthly sales.
Right, in terms of people coming to buy stuff or sit in cafes nearby, or that sort of thing. Presumably they're not coming in very great numbers.
I went there and there was still some tourists or some activity in the cafes and tourist shops around Notre Dame, but this, you've got to bear in mind, is the peak season. It's just after Easter. It's a big religious holiday has just passed. It's the beginning of summer in Paris. So this really should be the peak of the annual season. And it was very, very, very sketchy. There were very, very few people there. A local business owner that I spoke to, the tourist shop was called Au Jongleur de Notre Dame. They told me that this month, 70% drop in commerce. Last month was a 55% drop in commerce in April. The government has promised them indemnities, but they were all unanimous. They were saying that they have not received a penny from the government in terms of indemnities and compensation. And in the coming days, the shop owners say they are actually having a meeting to try and find out if they can get money that has been promised to them. All the shop owners around there are obviously quite despondent about what's happening. And one shop owner, Michel Mathieu, of a tourist shop called Outta, he's been there since 1975, by the way. He was quite worried, and he said, that this shop, he's been here for in excess of 40 years, and he said that not only is there, a month-on-month drop in sales up to 60% for him, he said this problem isn't going away. Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has given a 5-year deadline to rebuild Notre Dame, but the mood is very, very grey at the moment, and they say that this is a long-term problem and this is going to impact them in the long term. They're going to have to think of solutions to try and recoup this lost revenue.
And there are quite a number of people, of course, who did lead tours of Notre Dame, both professionals and volunteers, etc. What are they up to?
Well, I spoke with the Notre Dame officials to find out exactly what is happening to the tour guides that would, lead these myriad tours each day in Notre Dame, obviously one of Paris's most visited tourism sites. I was told there are some 110 visits a day, or there was at least, that were led by volunteer tour guides as part of an organisation called CASA. And there were 40 school group guides per day. These volunteers are currently pursuing other projects. The other kind of tourist guides that were operating in Notre Dame were the private tour guides. Now, these tourist guides I've spoken to told me they are still operating as part of the one-day trips that they do, tours to Notre Dame and its environs. Basically, the now one-day tours for tourists that are operating, they go on a day tour that comprise the Louvre, Montmartre and the Eiffel Tower. And the fourth part of this tour was Notre Dame. Now that fourth part, that Notre Dame part, is basically becoming a walk-around tour, as I explained previously, and they're just taking the tourists around. In a sense, it is a kind of disaster tourism. They're taking it around the site and the Ile de la Cité, and they stop off at the Sante Chapelle, which is another very famous chapel church, which is a stone's throw from Notre Dame on the Ile de la Cité.
Right, so if you're going to Paris and you're determined to get some version of Notre Dame, it's best to imagine that you're going to kind of get a gander from a distance.
Absolutely. The tourist guide said that the tourists very much still want to see Notre Dame. And let's bear in mind, this fire, although heralded as a disaster, and of course it was, spared the front stone facade of the cathedral. So the front facade of the cathedral, with its big pillars and towers, is still extremely beautiful and extremely visually arresting. You can still see that in all its glory from the other side of the river.
And is there spillover, an effect on places like Montmartre? Just to put it in American terms, it sounds to me a little like you were planning to come see the New York Yankees, and instead at the last minute we're switching you and you're going up to see the AAA Rochester Red Wings, to go to Montmartre or Sante Chapelle instead of Notre Dame. But what is it like for people? Are they seeing some spillover?
That's certainly a funny comparison. I've been told by the Notre Dame officials that there's been a surge in tourists at the Sacre Coeur, which is, of course, the big, imposing cathedral at the top of Montmartre, which is, of course, on a hill. So the tourists that would have been otherwise visiting Notre Dame, now it's closed, seem to be congregating around the Sacre Coeur and visiting that beautiful church as part of their tour in the Montmartre area, which of course is very famous with tourists and has, its own cafe life and has its specific artistic and a cultural history up there. So that's obviously taking the tourists that would have gone to Notre Dame.
We're talking with Thomas Adamson in the AP Paris Bureau about what things are like in the wake of the big fire that destroyed the roof at the Notre Dame Cathedral in April. We'll have more, and we'll talk about some of the restoration work that's just barely beginning after we take a break. This is Get Outta Here, the AP Travel Podcast.
Download the AP News app for the latest in news, sports, travel, entertainment, and more. Available now for iPhone and iPad.
It's Get Outta Here, the AP Travel Podcast. I'm Warren Levinson, and we're talking with Thomas Adamson in the Paris Bureau. So, Thomas, in the wake of the Notre Dame fire, there were a lot of very high-profile pledges from big companies, from wealthy individuals, that we will contribute whatever money it takes to rebuild or to repair this cathedral. Where does all that stand?
There were huge pledges by some of France's most famous and richest businessmen, Bernard Arnault, François Pinault, the Bettencourt family, which of course own L'Oréal. Basically, Notre Dame was promised in excess of 1 billion euros in a couple of days, really. I found out that not a cent really has been given by any of these billionaires or rich families to this date. Cathedral officials have told me that essentially these big businesses are waiting to find out exactly what the construction plan is before they sign their checks. The cathedral officials said this is very much their right. They want to know if it's, a pledge of $100 billion or $200 billion. They have a right to know where that money is going. So as of yet, the plans are still quite sketchy as to what they're going to do with the spire, how it's going to be reconstructed, what exactly they're going to do in terms of the rebuilding of the roof. So until that, these rich donations have not come in. In its place, I found out that a organisation that was founded in 2017 called the Friends of Notre Dame Foundation is picking up the tab. The Notre Dame Foundation is mainly made up of rich Americans on its board, and the Friends of Notre Dame gets around 90% of its donations from Americans, from volunteer and benevolent Americans. Now, currently, the Friends of Notre Dame is actually footing the bill to pay the wages of all the workmen and employees that are currently working at Notre Dame. So it may seem strange, but these big donations that were pledged and splashed on the front pages of newspapers all over the world in April have not actually come in.
Huh. Well, give us a sense of what kind of work is going on now inside the cathedral. You write about a remote-controlled robot that's scooping up bits of lead.
Well, there are lots of different things going on in Notre Dame, as I've discovered. One of the most, I'd say, interesting or at least curious things, as you mentioned, is this robot, which might be called the robot detective. So basically, as it stands inside Notre Dame, I've not been allowed in, but I've seen photos from the Notre Dame officials. In the middle of the piles of rubble and debris in the centre of the burnt-out Notre Dame, at the top there are two nets which catch any falling debris that still hasn't fallen from the roof. And on the bottom is a roving robot, which might look like something that, the American government has sent to Mars. It's like a probing robot detective that's kind of rolling over all the rubble and piece by piece, debris by debris, just picking up all the fallen roof and transporting it to a safe location that's kind of protected from the weather at the side of the cathedral. Now, this robot's function really is to get the debris into a safe place so that it can be then passed on to the police to essentially be used as evidence in part of the police inquiry. Bearing in mind, no one really knows what was the origin of this fire at this point, and any piece of this rubble or debris could harbour key clues as to what started it. So the robot is particularly interested in anything like electrical cabling, any wires, because when the fire broke out, there was scaffolding at the top of the spire that was being used by workmen, basically to carry out the restoration of the scaffolding. And one of the potential leads was, is this an electrical short circuit? Was it an electrical error that actually caused the spark that set fire to Notre Dame in the first place? The other thing that's really interesting that's going on is also due to a rather strangely named robot that's called a sucker. Now, a sucker, as the Notre Dame officials explained to me, is a kind of vacuum cleaner machine that's being manned by 2 people every day on the forecourt of Notre Dame. When the fire broke out, about 300 tons of lead was burnt by the flames that composed its roof, and the lead basically either was molten or went up into the air as the flames consumed the cathedral. But lead, being so heavy, kind of fell down to the ground and is now basically collected all around the Ile de la Cité as lead dust. This special machine is being manned by these 2 workers to suck up this rather toxic lead dust all around the forecourt. So it cannot really be open to the public until all this dangerous lead has been removed. Now, this in recent days, the Paris Regional Health Agency has issued some sort of warning about lead pollution after a child was tested as having too much lead in his blood. The agency said it had taken samples of the air and thankfully concluded that there is no risk in the air. The risk instead is perhaps actually on the ground, because lead, as I said, is heavy. It has sunk to the ground, and they issued a recommendation that all pregnant women and children under 7 that live on the Ile de la Cité have blood tests to check the lead levels. I spoke to an official at the agency who told me that this recommendation was given essentially because children are prone to playing on the ground, and so if the danger is now to be found in the dust, then as a precautionary measure, these children and pregnant women need to just have this blood test to check that all is in order in terms of the lead content in their blood. Elsewhere, there is already a huge restoration and cleanup process in order. 130 other workers, in addition to these 2 people working the vacuum machine outside, 130 other workers are involved in the cleaning of the cathedral every day and on restoration preparations.
That's a lot of work. So the bottom line on visiting this summer is if you're planning to see Notre Dame, it's best seen from a distance.
Exactly. I spoke to another official who actually had an optimistic piece of news that for tourists that do want to see Notre Dame, it may be opened, the forecourt at least, in the next few weeks. So as I explained, the lead dust needs to be cleaned up, but as soon as that's done, and that's expected to be completed in the coming weeks, a part of the forecourt will be opened to tourists who will, for the first time since April, have access to that front courtyard where you'll be able to, of course, to see these majestic towers. Now, the official also told me that one of Notre Dame's most famous works of art, which was actually saved during the fire, might be brought out on display to the public into this forecourt as soon as the end of June. I'm talking about a life-size stone statue called the Virgin of Paris. It is nearly 2 meters tall, and it's a 14th century statue of Mary and Jesus that is attached to one of the pillars inside that cathedral officials told me Notre Dame was named after. So it's an extremely significant and symbolic statue that could be visible and brought out to the general public in the coming weeks. So that's a small glimmer of hope for people hoping to see Notre Dame again.
Right. You got to give people some kind of reason for knowing that work is proceeding or something is proceeding to bring this back to its its former glory.
Just to add, I also got some updates in terms of where we're at with the construction, which was very interesting. First of all, if anyone is interested, they are creating a wooden walkway right now to get the workmen access to remove the scaffolding, the pre-existing scaffolding that was in place before the fire to aid restoration of the spire. So if you've been reading up on this, you'll know that there was a big, long overdue restoration underway to restore the spire. Now, that produced some 250 tons of scaffolding that was burned out during the fire and that remains in place. So any tourist going around Notre Dame will see this gargantuan mass of scaffolding that's at the top. Now, that's one of the first stages in the restoration process. That's where the restorers are now trying to target. So they're going to remove the scaffolding, and then the next step after that is to remove a small temporary plastic sheet known as the umbrella, which was put in place very early on to replace the burnt-out roof. Notre Dame has no roof, so they were basically trying to stop rain and other elements causing further damage inside. And they want to replace that with a bigger, semi-permanent, more robust type of a plastic covering or umbrella. And once that has been put in place, then they will be able to start the reconstruction of the roof and the vaulting. And they're going to start with the restoration of the middle vault, and that apparently will be the first stage of the reconstruction. And the Friends of Notre Dame are paying for this first stage. They've just made their first payment to Notre Dame of 3.6 million euros in June, and that will be to pay the workmen's salaries for this first stage of restoration. One of the biggest controversies after the fire at Notre Dame was a pledge by the Prime Minister of France, Edouard Philippe, to open up the design of the burned-out iconic spire to a contest. So opening really the design of France's most iconic spire to the best proposal and the best design. I've spoken to Notre Dame officials who have told me it's not so simple. Essentially, Notre Dame is a very unique cathedral. Unlike big cathedrals around France, like Cathedral at Amiens or the Cathedral at Chartres, Notre Dame is on an island, and that meant that the foundations of Notre Dame are very, very shallow. They're only about 6 meters deep, apparently, which is extremely shallow for a cathedral of its size and of its weight. Basically, what that means is that Notre Dame needs a minimum weight as a roof to essentially hold the edifice in place. And if the roof does not meet its minimum weight requirements, there is a risk that Notre Dame could move and slip. And essentially, being next to the Seine River, that has considerable repercussions.
Yeah, I guess so.
So there are certain specifications. A lead and wood roof is ideal, whereas something like glass might not be suitable because of its relative lighter weight. In any case, the contest has not been open, so really watch this space.
Wow, so it's like, there's 300 tons of lead in the roof. It wasn't just because it was old kind of construction. It was literally a structural thing to keep keep the whole edifice in place. Well, thank you very much, Thomas. I really appreciate it. Thomas Adamson is a correspondent in the Associated Press Bureau in Paris. And now, my favorite trip. John Marshall does a lot of traveling, but as an Associated Press college basketball writer, much of that time is spent inside hot gyms. But not long ago, Marshall spent 4 days taking in the outdoors, the natural splendors of the Hawaiian island of Kauai. Oh, and by the way, the golf was great. So, John Marshall, you took a golf trip recently to Kauai. There's a lot of really good golf in Hawaii, but Kauai stands out. How come?
I go over there every year for the Maui Invitational, the college basketball tournament, and I've played a lot of the courses in Maui several times, and they're really good courses. But the ones in Kauai, I guess because of the scenery, Kauai is, I guess, unspoiled maybe still in a sense. Some of the other islands are a little touristy, and the courses there are kind of, There's several that are right along the ocean. Couple courses have holes where you can hit over the water, like you've got crashing waves below you, and the big mountains are always in the backdrop, and they get quite a bit of rain there, so the courses are all in really good shape. I think there's 9 courses there, so there's a decent variety. You can go all the way from the north side, and then come a couple hours to the south side down to Poipu Bay. And there's just a diverse amount of courses, and they're all, like I said, in really good shape, and the views are spectacular.
Do you have a favorite among the 9?
I don't know. I think that would be a toss-up. Princeville Mackay up on the North Shore is unbelievable. It's set on part of it's set on some cliffs above the Pacific Ocean, and you got a couple holes that are like you're hitting over the ocean, and the views are unbelievable. And Poipu Bay was really good too. That's on the south side. They get a little less rain, and that's where Tiger Woods played. And there was the Grand Slam of golf, where the major winners would play every year, and I think he won there like 6 or 7 times. And it's a really cool course that you come down, I think it's 15 or 16, and you end up on this huge cliff, and the hole drops down and follows the cliff along the Pacific Ocean. And then the Hakalua Ocean course was right up there too. That's a very high-end course. I think it's got 4 holes along the ocean, and it's at the point of a bay near Lihue, which is the big city in Kauai, and just unbelievable views, and a really cool golf course.
The views ever distracting when you're on the course?
Yeah, I think there tends to be, on some of the holes along the ocean, there tends to be delays in the groups in front of you and in your own group, because people are standing on the edge of the cliff and taking pictures and looking out at the right time of year. You're looking out at whales or dolphins, and it tends to slow things down a little bit just because people want to take in the beauty.
I could just imagine it. It does seem really cool. So what is it like going to play instead of going when you've got a little bit of time off covering the Maui basketball tournament?
It was awesome. I mean, usually when I first started covering Maui, I went out like the Saturday before the news conference on Sunday, and I spend 12 hours a day in the gym. I'm like, well, I can't do this again because I don't even have time to go into the ocean or do anything. So I started going out like 4 or 5 days early, and my birthday is usually the week before, and I would play golf and swim and do all the touristy things. But this past year, a friend of mine had a connection and knew some of the golf people there, so I went out and just decided to go to Kauai this time, and that's pretty much all I did was it 4 days of golf. I mean, there's some really cool things to see in Kauai, but this was just a golf trip with a couple of buddies, and it was amazing to just play golf for 4 straight days and not really do anything else.
And not particularly crowded, or do you really know?
Well, that's one of the great things about Kauai is that it's like on the the northwest edge of the islands, and it's a small island comparatively speaking, and it's kind of isolated, is I guess what I'm trying to say. So not as many people go out there. You go to like Waikiki Beach, or if you go to even Maui's getting pretty touristy and pretty densely populated with tourists when you get to the like the tourist towns. And Kauai is still there's one stretch where you're going from Lihue to the south side of the island, like Poipu Bay, where if you come at the wrong time of day, you kind of get stuck in a little traffic. But for the most part, it's not crowded at all. Just the island itself and the golf courses. Like I went off by myself. They couldn't find anybody for me to play with at Poipu Bay, and I just went around and played in like 2.5 hours. So you really don't have the crowding that you get, especially like I live in Arizona, and you get high season here, and every golf course is crowded. And you can go out and take your time, or you can go out and rip through the course without having to worry about the crowds.
It seems almost beside the point to ask, but how did you shoot this trip?
The views were spectacular. No, I didn't. I wasn't playing particularly well, but it was fun. I mean, I hit some good shots. Hit a really good shot with the head pro. I didn't play particularly well at Hakalua, but I hit a really good shot and ended up getting eagle, so that was kind of the highlight of the trip.
There you go. No, that's my feeling about golf, is you'll hit the ball 80 or 90 or 100 times, and maybe 5 of them will feel really good, and that's what gets you to go back.
Right.
John Marshall, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
John Marshall is an AP sports writer based in Phoenix. College basketball is his main beat, but he got some time off to roam the paradisical golf courses of the Hawaiian island of Kauai. And that's the show. Get Outta Here is a production of the Associated Press under the supervision of Nikessa Moody and Peter Costanzo. I'm Warren Levinson. We'll see you next time.
This episode of Get Outta Here, the AP Travel Podcast, was sponsored by Carnival Corporation, the world's largest cruise company with 10 of the world's leading brands, including Carnival Cruise Line, Cunard, Holland America Line, Princess Cruises, and Seabourn. To learn about the world's leading cruise lines from Carnival Corporation and great vacation options, contact your travel professional or visit worldsleadingcruiselines.com.